Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. It's Shirley with Spirit of Matter. And today I'm doing France chart. I'm going to show the chart in the caption. It won't let me do live, that's just the issue. And I saw that France has decided to change the legalities concerning the definition of rape. And what they used to call non-consensual sex is now considered rape after the famous case of the 70 men petering thingy. I don't know, whatever. And the brave, courageous woman who litigated and testified, and that literally changed the law in France. So let's do France chart. The immediate thing that popped to my mind as I saw this was, hey, France might survive a French Revolution thanks to that. And why am I saying this? We know we are at the bisextile. We know we have a conjoining of Pluto ingressing into Aquarius, i.e. the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the American Civil War, and Urano Beta Persei, i.e. 1939 to 1941, Second World War, which we know ended with women being able to have a bank account. And 200 million Russian dead. Japan has not learned from the A-bomb. They're still doing like men doing to women things that they would not accept women doing to men. That's so given A-bomb. Like that's evolving there. Yeah, the Jews. I said what I said. I mean, and everybody that was resisting the Eisenhower regime from Germany was a Jew. Remember when I saw Rutte comparing Putin to Hitler instead of Stalin in the Second World War? And that Mercury Pisces is is doing its thing. And I was thinking, well, this is given bad then Hitler, and I'm like, yeah, bad then Hitler is Eisenhower. Because the first thing I was thinking, well, this is not Eisenhower, this is bad then Hitler, and I'm like, bad then Hitler is Eisenhower, and those are things we probably need to get about the current times. So, what's up with France? France has 7-degree ascendant Scorpio. It has Mars 26 degrees Scorpio, Saturn retrograde 0-degree Taurus in the 7th, right, opposing Scorpio. And midheaven with Uranus, which is given, what do we remember France for? Well, the French Revolution. Midheaven conjoining Uranus. It has kind of like a stellium in the 12th. What was it? Yeah. And Pluto is in 21 degrees Aquarius. So if you're asking when is the pinnacle of like the guillotine stuff going to happen, that's very likely with the Pluto return for France, which is the second country after United States to go through a Pluto return. And the reason, okay, first of all, Uranus is going to go to ingress into from the 8th to the 9th, and Uranus passage through the 8th has been changing, apparently, the way that the very flexible litigation when it comes to sexual violence. France was the most difficult of the Western nation to prove allegation against sex offenders. And very satirically, it was also known for sexual freedom and pursuit of sensual pleasure. Why am I saying very satirically? Because sensual pleasure goes with willing consent. Okay? And that is, and regardless of gender. like, and regardless of kink or whatever, okay, you need to have trust, and you need to have, even BDSM is trust kink, okay, so to have trust you need to have safety word, which is a form of what we call willing consent. It's not necessarily tantric, but that is something that kind of is supposed to ensure that you won't grow candida and cancer and neurological diseases and whatnot by being too people pleasing in bed, granted that nobody is intending violence. So, I mean, not, how do I say it? Violence, okay? Like, not kink. And so, because France is so associated with both being known as supposedly sexually free and being the most challenging place to prove rape, it has accumulated to the case that we saw of a woman married to a man for decades, completely trusting him cooperating with the hospital, and basically under anesthesia, men coming to rape her, trading his wife in complete conjoining with the hospital, and that being defined as non-consensual sex and not as rape. That has changed. This is much thanks to Ketu on Venus in the mid-phase of Libra, and the Ketu Lilith there kind of gave us, okay, we're purging the old rules, judiciary procedures regarding something to do with sexual equality, okay, Lilith, because it was conjoining Lilith, and Venus that is transiting Lilith, and Venus that is natally in Libra for France. Okay, so that is, by the way, this is what all countries should do at this time, and I'm saying it completely as an astrologer. All countries should do such things at this time. Before it's too late. I mean, you can get to the 2 generation of men dead before women can have a bank account, and that, supports the global agenda of depopulation and enslavement of entire humanity, because that's like your new common ground. Or you can be foreseen and tend to the things you need to tend to. Anyway, it's not against anybody's favor to have like better sex for better world. Okay? That's been my motto since teenager: better sex for better world. And this is so bad that it has to be about willing consent and not like about juicy stuff. And like, we're still having this conversation, which is just tremendous stagnation for humanity and for sexuality altogether. Anyway, I do not digress. But that is what the Uranus is doing in the 8th house of France. Okay, Uranus since 2018 has been there, has been in Taurus, and now when it's conjoining Algol, yet another sign that Algol, while associated with bodies upon bodies, rape, and so on and so forth, and Uranus, unfortunately, mass rape. That's what we saw there, but is also associated with the liberation from these conditions. Okay, Uranus Beta per se is liberating us from those mundane challenges. Yet another indication that when we turn to the snake goddess, perhaps instead of raping and sacrificing children, grow some hibiscus and tend to abolishing this practice. That would be better relations with the snake goddess. And so nature will take its course, but if we can like avoid hurting ourselves, I think that's not bad, right? So this is feeling like France is being liberated from a lot of baggage it has been carrying, which will allow the ingress of Uranus to Gemini to be more benefic. And this is indeed where France is going to get back to the exact phase of being known around the world for revolution, and that is not going to change. Pluto is about just in November 19 will ingress to the fourth house of France. What that means? Fourth house of France is Aquarius, so it means exactly what we think it means. It means exactly everything we think it means. The fact that Uranus is right now going through the 8th to the 9th rather than, okay, with the midheaven, the 10th or the 11th, that changes a lot for the course of France, because that means France is being liberated from baggage it has been carrying, as well as being overly dependent on other countries. That allowed that. Okay, if you don't understand how willing consent works with wealth, bug me in the comments and I'll do a video about that. That will be a paid video. Okay, so if you can offer currencies that are independent of like satanic ritual abuse, that would be fantastic. And I'm open to suggestions. But essentially, when it comes to wealth investments, longevity of wealth, resources, land, anything good, okay, anything Venusian, anything pleasurable, the liberation from anything that waits on the willing consent and connection with sensuality without taboos, okay, is essential. Okay, it's not nothing that when I did Essence of Desire around the eclipse, I got the note for Blue Lotus that I ordered with the bag on the number 17, which is the number of Lilith, apartment number 7, and I was addressing a malefic thing that my real estate agent was involved in. So, and setting fierce boundaries around that before I received the oil. Okay, so that is a gigantic purgatory for me. Libra is the 8th house rather than Taurus, but that is a gigantic purgatory that we see as I set intention to do Essence of Desire, to reconnect with what I actually want in life in benefic way. I have to purge anything that's not on that line, and if the contract that I'm signed to is involved with malefic stuff, that is going to be purged, okay? However crisis situation it is. So what I like for France upon the embarking into the Second French Revolution is the fact that it is ridding itself from wealth obstacles, okay? Rape is wealth obstacle. It doesn't matter how, in which way you wrap it around, okay? This is wealth obstacle. I've been seeing this also when it comes to the way sex offenders are being represented. In Netherlands, we have a drug lord, Tachi, which is representing himself because he doesn't want to go into jail instead of some other person for pedophilia, doesn't want to get, like what may have happened to Hussein Baby Sin, and he literally found no lawyer office to represent him that is not connected with representing a sex offender. There is a code, gentleman code in mafias, that you are not supposed to be involved with hurting women and children. Whether it's preserved or not, I don't know for sure, because indirectly you are, and sex work and lack of willing consent is hurting women, which I think for mafias, okay, because they mainly trade, like, if I go to the Mokro Mafia, they trade MDMA and amphetamines. That's like MDMA is used against CPTSD, can actually help to recover from rape, both for men and women. And amphetamines is both built from cyanide, and yes, it can be crushed and used as cocaine, but it's also the Concerta that you use for your studies or Adderall-like drug. That people use to concentrate. It depletes magnesium, but other than that, it's that's the thing. That's what it's about. Okay, that's what the issue is all about. But if they upgrade their standard and include willing consent and absolve themselves of the sexpionage, because sex work is sexpionage, do not interact with that at all. They will sustain and they will have a lot better chances against the WHO than they have been going so far. And especially if they refrain from any drugs that can be used to rape someone. And that is more tricky, especially when it comes to amphetamines that can be crushed. But that's something that, like, to raise the standards can not only get them acknowledged legally as a business, but actually really solve a lot of the problems that are still been running into, like Hussein Bibisin. Although what he did with Joris Demink was reducing stigma against people who take hard drugs. When it comes to housings, you also have to mention that. And the thing is that this Tahi person just did not find any lawyer to represent him, does not represented sex offenders. That is a giant wealth block for entire judiciary system in Netherlands. So when it comes to making money as a lawyer, no, it's not just, because you represented somebody. So it's not just because you represented a sex offender, it's also the how you represented a sex offender. And was it on the account? Like, were you really not taking willing consent into account? That diminishes your wealth as well. Okay, if you use theories like Basser van der Kolk that encouraged people to rape as to absolve war trauma, you're perpetuating, the wealth blocks for yourself. And no, you can't just say it's business, because that's the holistic view Uranus Beta Persei reminds us of when we come to deal with the snake goddess. And so rather than placing the blame on the person that was raped as being a succubus, a seductress, often the succubus is the people that programmed them. And it's all sexpionage. A more accurate would be the deeper work, which eventually will happen, which is to reconnect with essence of desire and practice our sensuality. That changes entire life, whether it's our daily routines. And this is how the case for this woman who represented herself and opened her own case in front of the judiciary system in France, when we know there's a problem in the entire Supreme Court. I already talked about it structurally with the cult, but still she managed to get a huge thing across, and that's changing, the public shock, the public exposure, that's changing for entire judiciary system. And this is going to cause a lot of drama for all these judges that had to drug children and rape them under the guise of non-consensual sex, blah, 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 blah. And that is the meaning of that. And this is a blessing. And for some people, it may seem as a blessing in a lot of disguise, but this is a giant blessing because we are removing the old standards, and we're setting in the stage for something that when you practice willing consent, and I can say this as a person who practiced that, okay? That is changing for your entire constitution, okay? It changes for your food, it changes for your routine. You cannot, you're more attuned to your body, you cannot attuned to slavery, for example, okay? You get sick more, you pay attention that the sicknesses that you get are connected to that way before you would pay attention that if you just worked for a security job. And I said, as a person who just worked for safety jobs while telling all the people to chase their dreams, And that backfired, okay, very massively on my physical and mental health. So it changes for everything that you consider. Like, you really have to change everything from the core, but it opens up and unlocks the gates to genuine wealth, success that you can be happy with, accomplishments that you can be proud of, that are attuned to your values. Venus, okay? Venus, vagina, values, willing consent. For the penis people, that's still values and that's still vagina, except that now you're attuned to the vagina, which means you become attuned to your penis as well. If you're into vagina people, okay. Or alternatively, if it's like penis to penis, that would be sense of connection, okay, and your overall attunement and ability to reach relaxed arousal, which you need to orgasm. So that's why I said, okay, if a guy is gay and you say, oh, he mistreats women because he's gay, as undercover gay, no. If he mistreats the feminine, he will be unsatisfied sexually and emotionally in a relationship with the man as well, regardless of which, polarity he plays on, or if he plays on both polarities. So when France is making this step, is making this change, that is already spiking up the Second French Revolution, because people will not be able to do with slavery, oppression. They will be looking at things more holistically. They will be desiring of spiritual freedom as well, okay? And spiritual freedom has been depleting in France, okay, with the influx of religious institutions that you could expose more and more. That has been still depleting, okay, since the France that separated from the church, that has still been depleting. So, and this is going to, for the people that are, let's say, Muslim or Jews that live in France and will have to adhere to this code, okay? They cannot blame people for non-consensual sex. And this is also within marriage, because this woman is happening in her marriage. That is a giant step that can actually save, they can actually save their religious freedom, at least in France. And can save them from deportation. People who work for the Americans, okay? I cannot anymore with you, okay? Like, really, if we want to save people, refugees, from deportation, they have to show that they don't do that dumb fuckery, okay? Because they're blocking on their wealth, whether they're immigrants or refugees. That's and that's true for the elite cults as well. But this is what sparks for me the Second French Revolution. This is when people will decide that, hey, I cannot live with the landlord. For example, for me, the revelation was that even after the big boom with like the Makler, and he's overstepping boundaries in ways that is beyond anything, there was the other issue where you could feel the person's energy around the house. And I'm like, okay, you build that estate, maybe you need to live there, which means that I must live without anybody. Okay, it kind of created a situation where I understood it's not for me to live, just like it's not for me to work under a boss, because I got Uranus in fucking 10th house, okay? I can't be boss. And my second house is Aries, which means like it's the CEO of something, not, okay? not anything else. And I would get a lot of problems with that, because you have, when you are like a tiny CEO in a place, you don't have colleagues. People just look at you and like they hate your guts, and you're just coming to improve upon things, but you don't have that algorithm for doing anything else. So you got to work for yourself, okay? And people are going to understand that with land and housing. I've seen, this is one great thing Uranus did in Taurus. and I talked about the fact that people began to have homeowners began to grow a garden that is natural garden, bringing in the birds, bringing in all the natural ecosystem and vegetation and allowing it to be, and they had problems with the municipality. Okay, so this is how Uranus is liberating us from all those things that we just lived with, because hey, if you think about the beautiful refined gardens in France, then yes, that looks fantastic. Okay, you have a wonderful cultural time and everything is so tidy and so on. But when Uranus liberates us a little bit, we understand something that was okay, because if the municipality would cut the trees and trim everything and everything would look so tidy, we would be grateful to pay our taxes and to see them in return in the pleasant neighborhood. But when we grow a lawn and we have the natural view of the birds and so on and so forth, we want to remove for this regulation. Hey, nobody, if I'm a landowner and a homeowner, nobody gonna tell me what to do with my house, okay? And I've seen my makler trying to fixing the lawn, no more of grinding, cutting all the trees, okay? Like, he wanted to make decisions on his property. And that's fair because he built the property, but I gotta be living in my own property, okay? That gotta be accessible. So with France, I see that totally happening, where people begin from the land, begin from the backyard, begin from understanding they need a backyard, and can no longer be bossed around, or the thing where we appreciated our municipality or even our government for trimming all the trees and for making everything tidy and for doing, the pesticide. Now we think differently, and now what was something we appreciated, the values have been transformed, and now we want to kick that the fuck out. You won't tell me that my property doesn't look pretty, or is not aesthetic, or is not this, or is not that, or is not healthy when you spray all these pesticides. Okay? You won't tell me what to build in my backyard. We getting the get your rape culture off our lawn way more intensely in a country like France, and I love seeing that. So Pluto getting into the fourth house, and you see fourth house Aquarius is very organized. Okay, first of all, it's a huge space. Yeah, I'm immediately thinking sphere and sundry. Okay, but it's kind of like, it's a huge space. It's very well organized, like a French palace. Okay, and it's very well kept. The architecture appears even in the slightest things. So the trees have their own thing, and it has something that is unusual or playing with the time, with the architecture, or even astrological or scientific to it. There is a thoughtfulness behind the architecture, behind the gardens, and it's big. Okay, a big giant space that is very well designed. And Pluto is coming to dredge up all the things that were underneath. So if you ask me, where will Bingo Expandable Children Caves be most successful, other than Caitlin Kopek's house, that would be France, because France has fourth house Aquarius. France wants right now to move towards exposing what is underground. Okay, imagine you buy a household, you buy a monastery, you buy a place, and the place looks great, and it looks fit for like astrological, spiritual work, and then you have a doorway, okay? And the entire energetics tell you to look underneath, what is underneath, and you find the monastery, and then you find, dead bodies of children, or maybe people still having ceremonies there. So that would be dredged up, and this is why they persecuted the Rosicrucians and the Masons. And I know that a lot of my viewers are Rosies and Masons, and a lot of you grew up in the lodges, and all of my astrological knowledge and my knowledge is from the Enlightenment, and all of our education is Masonic, okay? That being said, the reason that these lodges were persecuted is the rituals that are going underground. And it might seem a little bit cool when you're like in a youth program, but when you get to the upper ranks, it's no longer cute. It's no longer cute. It's no longer something that we can be okay with as society. And then when we the people find out what it's at, and also the lodges, okay, the lower ranks of the lodges find out what's underneath the church. You know, if I don't know what's underneath Oranje Kerk and other Bingo Expandable Children, other than Efteling, which is like my childhood, is the churches. Okay, and for me, above ground, I see heaven, right? All the flags of all the religions, and the pride flag, and the priestess astrologer, and I enjoy, okay, sitting for the Sunday mass. And you know me, I'm a possibilionist, okay, so I'm completely flexible about religion as long as it respects humanity and my sovereignty and so on. And everything is so freaking cool, and you drink your coffee and you talk, and you know that's a great way to spend your Sunday. And you just walk out. Like, I believe if I'd be living around there, I'd be coming every Sunday for church. And I'm not even, you know, all that religious, just because of the experience. And so when you find out, when you dig underneath the ground and you find out, let's say there is a monastery there, bless you. See my mama sneezing again. That's truth. That's truth what I was about to say. Because when you see that your pleasurable Jupiterian place underneath the ground have torture chambers or whatnot, then you understand why suddenly it is such a benefic church is being persecuted. Because if somebody told me that, I don't know, people at Oranje Kerk are being persecuted, I'd be like, what? What for? This is such a benefic place. They respect LGBTQ, they respect all religions. The priest was an astrologer. I was like, yes, exactly, because of that. They're Masons. What's the problem? Well, you know what's underneath. And that's what Pluto is going to do to the entire land of France. Bingo Expandable Children Caves, France underground. I said what I said, okay? People are gonna know. They're gonna know, because that's gonna be the reason when they want to expand these underground structures, that you can't trim your lawn, and you can't dig holes in your lawn, and you can't do this to your lawn, and you can't do that, because they don't want them to shake the ground of this architectonic structure where they sacrifice the children. And then they make you pay taxes for growing your own agriculture. But now that Uranus is in Taurus, we are rebelling that. No, it's like it is happening just at the time where not because of famine or anything, we're just wanting to grow more of our own soil as well. By the way, women that have been saved from MK Ultra and from sex trafficking, and women that were survivors of incest, I saw those that were recovering, those that I seen, and that can be like what I was running into, they were growing plants. And so while I was working on, you know, kind of like believing yourself and so on, and spreading those type of informations that assisted these people also, they were growing their own garden and eating from their garden, and their experiences inspired me to grow my own garden as well. And oh my God, that's healing. You grow with the garden, okay? So that's essential, to have access to your own land which you can grow things in. It's essential to recover from sexual boundary violation. Now you combine that with the French Revolution. You combine that with, we don't want a boss over our head to tell us what to do or whether to collect our waters. And you combine that with Pluto's tendency to bring what is underneath the ground onto the air. And you understand the cults will be persecuted because of the ritual sacrifice that will be exposed. Now, if you think that it won't happen to the tribes, you're wrong, because a tribe is like a cult. That's why United States was founded in 1776. And that's why the civil war that ensued later, it was very possible because they came to a land that included many cults that kill each other and cannibalize on each other. It's not white man's words, it's indigenous people's words. You just have to listen to them, and they speak the truth. They don't want to be seen as the pitiful people, and so it's not about not acknowledging colonialism, medical welfare, and stuff like that, but it's also not forgetting their own heritage and history, which they can learn from and change so that we won't have another colonialism. So that's what's happening in France, okay? They're going to dig up the stuff, and if you're lower rank lodges, okay, that might just mean for you that you come to some ceremonies which you may relate to more or less, and you get to know people, and you get to have a community, and you get to have a business, and so on, okay? Like I said, if I would be living at the Pipe, you would find me every Sunday in church. You would find me every Sunday in church. And I'd be putting them, that money on the plate. But when you don't understand what's going on at the upper rank, and you're like, oh, this is false accusations, this is this is that, and you don't tend to what's within your community, within your families, within your lodges, then the time will come when they'll take everybody. And you say, Shirley, is it the same with the Jews? Well, unfortunately, in many cases where there were marriages where they were looking for the blood on the cloth, on the white cloth, which basically mean that they weren't having a penetration that is tantric for the first time, that's hurting Jews when we do genitalia mutilation that is against the word of God. It's against the word of Abraham's God, okay? Not Jesus' God, not Muhammad's God, Abraham's God, because it was a request from Abraham that God resisted, but back down. Read the Bible. That's hurting Jews, yes, that creates anti-Semitism. What is the word Baal doing in Jewish language for husband? It's not the God the Jews worship. Okay? And that would still be okay, because you could worship Beta per se, but if you worship her with hibiscus, with growing hibiscus in your garden and not sacrificing children, then you will get the benefic things, okay? You would get the wealth, you will get the no victim blaming, you would get the tantric connection with your sensuality, okay? I don't know how would people, if they wouldn't sacrifice and rape for Baal, I don't know what would Baal be, okay? So it's not the avodah zarah, the foreign, like pagan job, whatever. It is the fact that we do things that are not in alignment with even our divinity and the God that the Jews even worship, and then expect us to not be persecuted for what we later called blood whatnot. And then in the upper rank, where they join into, unite with those secret societies, because all the persecuted people unite, right? And then in the upper ranks, they still do these things. And in the lower rank, you think this is not true, but children are being kidnapped and nobody questioned that. People are still asking in Orthodox communities for the blood on the cloth, and nobody's questioning how is the first time for the vagina person. It's not, you're not supposed to be bleeding, okay? Of course, it doesn't contribute to avoiding a Shoah. And I'm going to keep it at that. What happens later with infanticide, with things that we don't know, with violence within the family that nobody tends to because nobody talks about this, okay? And this is in every society. It's in Christian societies, in Oho, it's in Muslim society as well, indigenous society. We need to tend to that before we get the Pluto ingress, which is just in like 10 days or so, a little more than 10 days, 19 November. Because you won't be able to go back to your church, even with the pride flag, and drink your coffee and put money on the plate and not be seen with those Masons that do those rituals when you say these are false accusations, when scientifically the cure for psychosis is housing first, independently of ability to work, access to garden and grow things in your garden, and being believed and supportive environment, then even your voices and sensual experiences become benefic. Pluto in Aquarius is also the science. But for France, beyond the science, which is also the science, it is going to be the exposure of literally what is underground. And Saturn is in Taurus. So, what did I tell you about the French Revolution? Okay, people didn't want you to grow these crops, paying many taxes. Why? Because they're building a monastery in your lawn. Taurus is your lawn. Saturn is in Taurus. In the 7th house, retrograde, 0-degree Taurus. Taurus is your garden. They have these freaking monasteries underneath your gardens. Very likely underneath mine there is also one. That's why when I build the half moon, the entire world go berserk. Cancel half the city to a cult that does this ritual abuse without that ending up underneath your lawn somehow in ways that we probably don't even know, because that's been a decade, 2 decades. Okay, if we got a pyramid for a synagogue, what's the pyramid doing with a synagogue, with all the respect to pyramids? Okay, if there is a cave underneath and you only build a couple of streets and you end up in my lawn. Bingo, expandable children. Caves. Now we conjoin that with Uranus Beta Persei. That's 1939 to 1941. Okay, so in France in particular, what's going underground is going underground your lawns when you live in France, and your gardens, and the beautiful, very tidy palace garden that you can spend days in is gonna pop. And the lodges are not going to look pretty. Keep saying this is false accusations, it's not happening, turning the other eye. And if you're turning the other eye, they're going to expect you to turn the other cheek. And they're going to have reasoning for that, because they're going to dig up the children. That's what stirred up the guillotine. Because the guillotine went with the persecution of the Masons and the Rosicrucians. Now, explain that to a village person. Explain that to a farmer. Okay? If you go see the Rednecks. I love country music. Okay? And it's running in the family. So, when you see what's the lifestyle of people who are living country music, they ask, when they want to connect with the right partner, they connect with God and say, God will give me for the right partner, because God says I'm loved, God says I'm this, God says I'm that. And sometimes they get a good relationship because of that. Okay, I remember for myself, Corinthians 13, I don't remember, okay? If love is patient, love is kind, it does not boast, it keeps no records of wrongs, okay? Of course, that's something that if a man, especially Christian man, treats me in a way that's different, I say love is patient, love is kind. And that's how, okay, they grow. But if they're thinking man and woman, they don't understand, they're not city people, because they don't understand the many divergence and the many nuances, because they don't live that. And what next they see a torture of child, and it looks like with boobs and a penis and balls, and they're like, what the fuck are they doing to these children? They've been cloning people. So immediately you think, oh, it's those LGBTQ guys that do that. Then you connect the dots. That's your thinking, not because you are stupid, but because you're not exposed to the nuances. Long story short, we're in 2024, also almost 2025, and just came in the last book of the autobiography, okay, of Darren Hayes, who happened to have been a gay man and was called gay before he knew what it was, and happened to have grown to an alcoholic and abusive father, and felt entire life unloved because he was homosexual. And everybody thought that meant what? So the bridging between the worlds and how these practices endanger the very societies that we want to accommodate for, which is two-gender society, which is basically two-spirit society. It's not cultural appropriation, because they're being, within the elite cults, they're being inbred, especially this way, and with an extra chromosome, and they're being raped and tortured. That's Trudy Verstegen's contribution, okay? But if you go to Trudy Verstegen's contribution, you're gonna be spooked out, because it's like the Zionists, the Jews, and sometimes the Vatican. So it sounds like she's doing some anti-Semitic caricature. She's not. She's had her children kidnapped, so she doesn't have time for explaining to people what with all the nuances, because she's going through something, and every day she has another assassination attempt. So it's kind of difficult to phrase yourself according to everybody's political standards, so you get the message across. And so, is it going to be another intense French Revolution for France and persecution of the cults and the lodges? Unfortunately, yes. At this point where we are sitting, I'm sitting, this is November 6th, and November 19, we already have the ingress. How much time do we have to convince people? How much time do we have to explain? Okay, how much time did Israel have on September 26th, before 7th October, to convince people that Zionist does not equal Jews, does not equal Israelis, does not equal baby eaters, does not equal satanic cults, does not equal infiltration of the WHO, does not equal eugenics, does not equal the lean Jew, but some of them actually equals all of them. And you're gonna have to find out who is who. Okay, nobody had the time to understand that when we bombed Palestine. Nobody had the time for us. Nobody had the time for us. Except for the Christians that were putting a mezuzah, okay, some Jewish symbol with the fish. And because they put the fish, then some Jews were calling them out as cultural appropriation. They were literally risking their lives so that they would not differentiate which door to persecute, so which Jew will die. And they were called out for cultural appropriation. Never forget. By Jews, of course, yes. In Ivy League, mind you. Now, when it comes to the lodges in France, we are November 6th. If you've been listening to my channel, I've been saying, get out of the lodges, get out of the lodges, get out of the lodges. Not because I don't appreciate of the contribution of the Enlightenment and the Masons and the Rudolf Steiner and all that. No, or astrology, okay? No, it's because these practices that are taking place in the higher rank will be exposed, and ain't nobody got time to understand your, moon cult astrology thingy is not exactly that. And being a person that has both Jewish ancestry and doing astrology and Dutch ancestry with blood in their name, okay, Jungblut, then I don't know, okay, and it's not like I operated my nose or anything like that to make it invisible. Yeah, I can see the problem. But we also have to understand that when we do tend to this, that's tremendous change that we're doing, and that is remediation that we're doing. And it can take you from literally no risks of survival to even thriving later. But we got to tend to these children. We got to tend to these practices. And when we talk about hermaphrodites, it's not a porn show of showing breasts and balls and dick, because, hey, it's the breast and balls and dick that are shown, okay? It's not the men that are, crossing as men. And we make it a porn show instead of talking about the abuse of the children and emphasizing that instead of having boobs and ball snuff, which is important. But if you're a mother whose children were kidnapped, you get this photo, you put it on a video, you get this photo, you put it on, you have no time to edit and to look at what the message, what the this, what the that, between assassination attempt to another. But we as society, the people who are not this mother, we need to understand that just to say reptilians is not, it's like, these are the people that grew up in the Holocaust, that's in between Holocausts. Now you ask me, what about Neptune? What about Neptune? Because Neptune is going from the 5th to the 6th. And that's going to mean there's going to be some sort of crisis about workforce. But also something to do with a pandemic that can affect the workforce and the animals. Or floods that can affect both as well. Contaminated water disease. It's going to be Aries. Mars is in Scorpio in the 1st. So France itself is going to be directly affected by Neptune, Saturn in Aries. All these ingresses happen 2025. All the while, Mars is not exiting its opposition to Pluto until April 25, I think, 2025. It's almost May. This opposition is happening on the 10th to the 4th. And so France is so notoriously known for the executions of its royals because the 10th house is the leaders. And it's Leo, so it's ruled by the sun anyway. And that's monarchy. And the 4th house is the farthest from the plate, which is the we the people, but it's also the underground cults, which happen to compete on land with the backyard of every French person. So, yes, the crisis is big. The fact that France already tended to its non-consensual sex as rape is going to assist in persecuting the correct problems about the cult. So it's not, that's the thing in favor, because if we address the problem, then we don't have to like do everybody who even is considered Masonic, which is MK Ultra today. And not everybody has to die immediately. Okay, it's the problem is those that participated in rape and those drugged children and drugged people underneath the ground. That's rape. But the thing is that to decide who did what, we understand that this is a problem, and the cults themselves want to exterminate people, and it's the war of the lodges, which makes it a lot more difficult. So last time France separated from the church with great, tremendous difficulties. It wasn't right away. And who pretended to be the people, which is the fourth house, people is also the moon, but the fourth house is these lodges, okay? So it's not exactly with the people, which is highly important to understand. It's also important to understand it in the context of the United States, right? But in this case, it's very particular because fourth house is Aquarius, which is those lodges, and the moon is the people. The fourth house, they're also the people, they're civilians, but those are not going to necessarily represent the people. And this is why the fact that that woman made history with changing the legislation in France is so important in giving France a chance to survive the French Revolution, perhaps a little bit better this time. That's the situation for France. Okay, the checks and balances were between the Masons and the royal family, and the Masons are enslaved, but also the royal families are enslaved. So it's but when you think about the common people, it's kind of like what happened in Israel yesterday. Benjamin Netanyahu fired Gallant, which immediately sent so many Israelis out to the street. Like if Israelis like French would do that for every raising of the public transportation prices, like in France, we would not be here today. Or for public housing, we would not be here today. But this is not allowed in Israel, which means Israel is not so much a democracy to begin with. And the people are too Masonic to do that, which means that the onset of the firing of Gallant, immediately people are ready with the flags and everything and the notes, and like within seconds, okay, they go out and it's like a theater. But when it comes to we the people, when it comes to what actually could save Israel from invasion, housing first, the way we treat the sick, and so on and so forth, those things tend to be quite postponed. Same for France, and this is something that stands against France and why it took 300 years to establish something in France after the French Revolution, because we cannot say we the people when the people are not peopling. At the same time, when the people, because we the people are usually kind of like the rural people, the people don't have money to live in the city. They don't get a flat or an apartment in the city or something like that. And that creates for a situation where indeed it's very difficult to understand what's all this. And I'm going to quote a redneck American during the Palestinian demonstrations, and says, what that woo 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 woo, okay? And he say, you come to my lawn, I shoot you because that scares me. So that's what we're heading to in terms of like society. And I'll end up with a story. When I was in Open Apartments, which is a volunteering project where you get housing for volunteering with like people in the neighborhood when you are yourself half homeless and You're basically more, they're more volunteering to give you food than anything else. But the thing is, you get housing for that. We did some good things, but the thing is, um, I had a friend, Aquarian, by the way, and he was mingling with the people. Okay, he was mingling with the people, and he helped the people, and helped women get apartment, and he had this and he had that, and he had a neighbor that was a little bit autistic, and he called him, in the Hebrew word would be mefager, which basically means kind of like, it's like a curse. Think about the least politically correct you would say for autistic or neurodivergent. And then his dancer roommate, who came from the center, immediately said, well, you don't say that, you say something more like autistic or neurodivergent or limited in da 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 da. And he's like, fuck it, he is mefager. Because that friend would not have the savvy intellect for it, but that friend would be sitting with that neighbor and would be talking with that neighbor and would be helping with that neighbor and would also be eating with that neighbor. That's true. And he spent the time with that neighbor, where this woman that never seen the neighbor has all the correct words for it, but is seen as this elitist person that doesn't care, which is not the truth. She just doesn't know how to express herself correctly. We're going to be having a lot of these on the ingress of Pluto, because people are not going to well understand each other. Even me, because I came from the city center, and even though I didn't live in the city center for several years, I would still have the culture of, getting to know my neighbors is something unusual again. Okay. And that was the kind of like the bridging. And then after 2 3 years, I hear someone that I have been educating her daughter saying, oh, we should kill the gays, we should this, we should that. Now, it doesn't mean she would go along with that. That was just verbally what she was saying. But you think about people, and I'm like having friends in the gay community that are like, they're genuinely being afraid of being murdered. So that's that's the situation. Okay. Now, usually when people meet and talk, they can fight, but they get to know each other and they mingle. But it's when they don't mingle that you have these issues. Um, and then they don't mingle, and you see that under so and so church in the city, that wasn't the same church that you have in the village. They found a couple of bodies of children with rape and torture marks on them, and they say it's the Mason. That's it. End of the story. So, um, that's why I said we need to tend to satanic ritual abuse. We need to tend to ritual abuse. It's not funny. All these assassination threats on the whistleblowers, on Hans Medma, on Trudy Verstegen, all this extortion way of putting up with things, that's not going to save anyone from being expanded. And those people that are being executed, those are the people that went through this abuse as well. They had to perpetrate it, and that's what is going on. And to bridge that to people, we're not going to have too much time. So that's something that really needed to be tended to ASAP. The only thing we do have working for us is Sedna trine in Pluto, which could mean that there can be more willingness to tend to this topic by people inside the cults, or inside these lodges, or inside these MK Ultra projects or global intelligence, because that's going to open a window for different life, for all of us. So, yeah, thank you for listening.